Are you trying to get in the video this morning? Welcome to HortTube. My name is John Putnam. This is the Sunday garden question and answer video that I do most Sundays of the month. The first Sunday of the month is a subscriber Sunday video where subscribers send in photos of things in their yard they're proud of. If you want to participate in that video, the email address is right here to send photos. Just make sure the email says subscriber photos or something like that. And if you would, turn your phone sideways if you're using your phone to take photos of things in your yard, because YouTube is a widescreen format and not an up and down format like Instagram or Facebook. So I got a lot of questions on last week's Subscriber Sunday video for this week, and I'll go ahead and get started on that. This week I have a ton of things going in the ground at this yard, and I think I still have 3 tour videos that I've shot that I have not finished editing yet. So you're gonna see early in the week those tour videos going up. One of them is just spectacular, every bit as good as the one that I shot over here last week. I hope that one will be fun. And another one right over here from another neighbor who has a fantastic camellia collection. Kind of caught the camellias toward the end of the season, but still a spectacular yard. And then from there, for like the next 2 months after that, I'm on lockdown here, trying to accomplish tasks, including fencing, if you didn't see the video from 2 days ago, in the front yard, eventually fencing here in the backyard. Stone will be coming within a week or so, and I'm going to start putting stone in some of the pathways and that kind of thing. Anyway, okay, let's get started on questions from last week. Somebody asked me about when they could move their daffodils. They've got some daffodils that have come up in their turf and just kind of all over the place, which is kind of what daffodils will do, over a long period of time. I divided the ones last year. I've got some along the driveway over there, and they were so crowded last year that I did it as soon as they started to go back to sleep so I could still find them. You want to give them time to start taking that energy from that green foliage back down into that bulb. But once they had almost declined, I went ahead and popped them out of the ground and moved them really quickly. Just like I say, they need that energy pulled down from the foliage, so I wouldn't damage them while they still have that up. But if you wait too long, then you can't find them. So there's a balance there. But I pop them out of the ground as long as you get them back in the ground pretty quickly. Super easy. Okay, somebody asked me about a container tree. They do most of their gardening in containers for who knows what reason. And they're in 6B, zone 6B or 7A, and wanted a container tree. But it was on the southeast side of their house and said it only got morning sun. And so, I always think of conifers first for containers if you're trying to leave something in a container and not have to move it, because most of them are so cold hardy. Boxwoods fit that as well. But if it's in a lot of shade like that, it might be a Japanese maple would be your friend. I have the contorted Japanese maple in a container in this backyard. It's been in a container for 10 years. So they make great container plants, and they're cold hardy enough that unless you had a situation where the temperatures weren't coming up for a couple days, above freezing for a couple days, it would be fine in a container where you are. Okay, and would like to have that morning sun and the afternoon shade so the foliage doesn't burn. That's where mine is back here on this kind of wood line that I have. Okay, somebody asked me, here was another bulb question about transplanting bulbs into the ground that they've grown into containers. And I do the exact same thing. Just let the foliage start to die back. The bulb will come up and bloom, and then it'll take about 2 weeks, sometimes even longer. The green will just sit there, and it needs time to soak in the sun's energy and pull all those nutrients back into the bulbs. There you go. But just wait till they're declining, and then go plant them in the ground. Okay. This question I got tons, and I probably will continue to get this question for a while. The folks in Texas who had all the freeze damage, Oklahoma, people want to know. People want my opinion on what to do with the plants that survived but are barely noticeable. So where the roots survived, they're coming back, but they're tiny. What I would do. Now, for me as a plant nerd, I think I would probably enjoy the process of watching something come back from the ground. Keep in mind, as long as it sounds like the roots didn't have any damage, and that root system's pretty extensive under the ground probably at this point. And so it's got a lot to pull from. So I think they would grow, they're going to grow faster than you would think coming back from the ground like that. If you went and bought something new and plugged it in the ground, it's going to have a much smaller root system to work with. The plants, obviously, what's on top of the ground is obviously going to be bigger. For me, I think I would enjoy most of them, just the process of them coming back. If it was a key plant, like a screening plant, like this Loropetalum is behind me, maybe I go and replace that. If it's a key, foundation plants where, I didn't want to wait 2 years to fill back around my foundation, maybe I go and replace those. But I do think that the plants that were in the ground that got killed back to the ground will come back much faster than you think because the root system is pretty extensive. The other problem with this year is just the supply of plants. I'm on a ton of email lists for wholesale nurseries across the country that I used to do business with, and they're all sending out emails like, we can't take any more orders for the next 2 weeks. We're overwhelmed. Thank you for your patience. I mean, it is, nobody in the nursery business has ever seen business like this. And so just finding the replacement pieces may take, until fall, and by then, the plants may have recovered. So maybe I just say, I'm just going to watch them for spring and summer, and I'll replace them in the fall if I still am not in love with them at that point. That may be a better solution for this particular year anyway. Okay, a lot of words from Jim. Okay, somebody asked me about planting hellebores into the ground. When is the best time to do it? Because they've got some in pots now. Any time you want to put them in the ground, really. A lot of people don't like to plant in the summer, but certainly early spring here is perfect, and fall would be as well. But I mean, I'll plant hellebores. I brought hellebores back from Pine Knot in January, and popped them in the ground. They're so tough. They're really, really tough plants, as long as you don't put them in a spot that is inundated with water. Typically, the survival rate's very high on hellebores. Okay, somebody said they planted a Loropetalum and it lost its color. And they have another one that's close to it that still has its color. So it's probably not in, normally I would say it's in too much shade. That's what I would say when a Loropetalum loses its foliage color. This is a Loropetalum right here called Carolina Midnight. You see the dark purple foliage on it and the kind of reddish pink flowers. Normally when I see one that's supposed to be purple like this, but it's a greenish, I think it's in a little too much shade. But since they have another one that's close by and it's in too much shade, it's probably just transplant shock. So that's what I'm going to throw out. I think that you'll see the new growth, once it gets rooted in and established, look normal again. And it's just, like I say, some sort of transplant shock. Absolutely no reason for it to be green other than it wasn't happy temporarily. Okay, somebody says they got a tree-form camellia that stopped blooming, and it's got a few yellow leaves, and they transplanted it and fertilized it and don't know what to do to get this thing blooming. You can't make it bloom. Camellias have a bloom season. So, my Camellia sasanquas, which I have a lot in the yard, bloom in the fall, but those flower buds are actually set on them by the end of all of my Camellia sasanquas that I can see out here have new growth on them, about 1 inch, 2 inches long. They're going to grow to maybe 4 or 5 inches in growth, and then they're going to start to form their flower buds. And by summer, I'm going to already see the flower buds on them that are going to open in October and November. In October and November, no matter what I do, no matter what I try, I'm not going to get new flower buds. They've been, at the time they're blooming, those flower buds have been on them for months and months and months. My camellia, I think I have 2 Camellia japonicas, and I have 1 flower left on my early wonder Camellia japonica. That's the last flower that I have. All of those flower buds were on them in the fall. And so it wouldn't matter what I tried right now. There's no miracle that I can pull off to make new flower buds on those camellias. So it's normal, no problem whatsoever. That's the truth. That's true with almost all plants except for like summer flowering annuals and perennials that will bloom all summer, and things like butterfly bushes that are blooming on new growth all summer long. Those things, obviously, if they're not performing and they're not blooming, then there are reasons for it. But shrubs and trees, for the most part, have very set periods of time they're going to bloom, and those flower buds are set at a very particular time, and there's not much you can do about that. So don't love it to death trying to make it do something that you can't make it do. that's my suggestion there. Okay. Frost damage. A lot of people got frost damage last week and wanted to know whether or not to go ahead and cut that back. I've got I don't know if you can see a hydrangea here that got a lot of brown on it. I showed it in the video a couple days ago. I've got a butterfly bush here that I can see has some on it. A holly back here that had some damage on it. Nothing that can be done about it, and it's going to grow back out of that so fast that by the time I go get my shears out of the building over here and come back over here, it's already started to get new growth on it again anyway. So don't worry about it. Just the new growth comes out so fast on things in the spring, it will grow around that frost damage really quickly. If it's so unsightly, you know, something like that holly over there, it might not be a bad idea for me to prune it just in general, because you know, it's a bit leggy anyway. So you can make that decision based on that. But other kinds of little tip burn frost damage that we got a week ago, you won't notice it in 2 weeks. Okay, another bulb question. Somebody asked me about fertilizing their bulbs. They've grown their bulbs inside in containers and want to know whether to fertilize them. They're going to plant them outside after they're done blooming. Just fertilize them when you put them in the ground. I wouldn't fertilize them. I use organic fertilizers, so I tend not to. I do use fish emulsion on my seedlings in the house, and it can be a little bit funky. And Holly, who's laying in the grass here next to me, she likes the smell of it. But I try not to use, you know, as fertilizers, stinky fertilizers in the house. But when you put them in the ground outside, fertilize them with an organic fertilizer and move on. Let's see. Somebody asked me, are camellias fragrant? There are fragrant camellias. The other channel that I have with Bree Arthur, that No Rules Gardening channel, we did a camellia competition, and one of the camellias that I had on my side of the bracket was one called High Fragrance. That's reliably fragrant. I will say that it depends on the species that the camellias were bred from. So, you know, some have a tendency to be more fragrant than others. But for the most part, no. But there are ones that are actually fragrant, and when they hit you, it's kind of amazing. I'll be walking around the neighborhood, and I'll walk past one that is fragrant, and when they are, they are. But for the most part, no. Let's see. Got one more here. Somebody asked me, they've got a bee allergy, yellow jacket allergy, you know, those types of allergies, and don't want to attract any of those types of things into the yard, and we're wondering about a tree to plant. You know, the things that are going to be your friends, your friend are things like elms and oaks and birches. I've got an oak above my head, and it's been raining the whole time. The pollen on an oak is wind dispersed, and so you know, they don't attract bees on oaks, and that's the same thing with elms and birches. So those would be your friends, and then all conifers. You know, conifers have wind dispersed pollen, and so, you know, which is making us all miserable right now. This pine tree over here is turning everything in my area yellow, but it's wind dispersed pollen, and so you can. I think that's the thing you want to concentrate on, is conifers and the few trees that you know, are wind dispersed like that. And then the other plants that are like that are ornamental grasses. And so I would go to town with ornamental grasses if I were you. You can create a beautiful landscape out of ornamental grasses and carexes and some other grass-like plants that have wind dispersed pollen. That you probably have a different type of allergy to, honestly. But you know, I totally understand this. But yes, ornamental grasses would definitely be your friend, and you can probably Google some beautiful landscapes where they've used ornamental grasses with different colors and shapes and heights and sizes and that kind of thing to create beautiful landscaping without necessarily attracting bees to your yard, except for, I will say that that's probably where a lot of bees nest, are down in the bottom of those grasses during the winter time. So not thinking about that, but they're not active, you know, during that period of time. So All right, guys, thank you very much for watching the videos. You can ask questions down below, and I'll come back next Sunday with a question and answer video. And again, thanks for participating.